There's a type of crime that happens in silence, and ends as if it were the perfect crime, with no evidence left behind. And today's case is exactly that kind, a strange case that starts with a small thread, but ends up unraveling an entire life built on a lie. Imagine someone living under your name, taking over your house, your clothes, and even your past. And the strangest part of all, he wasn't discovered until a small watch stopped at a certain moment on a specific date. And just like that, a criminal who thought he was smarter than everyone else was caught. Forgetting that fate, by the will of God, can expose you through the simplest of things. Are you ready to hear today's story? A story uncovered because of a Rolex watch and a bit of luck, but one that's almost impossible to believe in its strangeness. Stay with me until the end, because the deeper we go into the details, the more shocked you'll be by the unbelievable turns. But before we begin, I have a small request from you that won't take much of your time. If you'd like to support the channel, please hit the like button and leave a comment on the previous video. Your support makes a big difference. And from my side, I promise to bring you the best content possible. That's my only ask. And now, let's begin the story. On the morning of July 28, 1996, at the Brixham Harbour in Devon, England, two fishermen set out on a routine fishing trip and headed toward a nearby coastal area. But at first, they weren't lucky, they didn't catch anything. So, they decided to sail 6 miles offshore, to a remote area known as the Rough Zone, which was rarely visited. They cast their nets and waited. About an hour later, they began pulling them in. The nets felt heavy, as if full of fish. But when they emptied them out, they were horrified to find something chilling. Among the pile of fish was the body of a man. The fishermen immediately contacted the Coast Guard, who arrived on the scene, and the police began a complex investigation. The body was that of a man who appeared to be in his early 40s. He was wearing a long-sleeved shirt, jeans, and brown shoes. No ID was found on him, but on his wrist was a Rolex watch that had stopped at the date 22. His pockets were turned inside out, indicating someone had searched them. The autopsy revealed the man had suffered a severe blow to the head, suggesting foul play. A faded tattoo was found on his arm, but it didn't provide any clear clues. However, hope hung on that watch. The Rolex watch, the first clue. Authentic Rolex watches have a serial number registered with the company, which can be used to trace the original owner. Police dismantled the watch and sent it to the Rolex office in London. 2 days later, they received the response. The watch was genuine and belonged to a man named Ronald Joseph Platt, who had recently had it serviced. This was enough to kick off a serious investigation. Police headed to the address listed under his name in Chelmsford. There, the homeowner said Ronald had been missing for a while, but had left behind a contact number for a friend named David Davis. The officers called David and informed him of his friend's death. He accepted the news calmly, without much emotion, something that triggered a small hint of suspicion. David was invited to the police station, where he presented himself as polite and well-dressed. He told them Ronald had borrowed money from him to travel to France, and then to Canada, after which they lost touch. He claimed Ronald had no enemies. Police took his word and assumed the incident was an accidental fall from a boat, especially with the head injury. The case was nearly closed, until a small twist of fate changed everything. A detective later tried to reach David again, but he didn't answer his calls. So, an officer was sent to his countryside home, an isolated place with no signs or clear address markers. The officer knocked on neighbors' doors and asked about David Davis. But the reply shocked him. The man who lives there is Ronald Platt. The officer was stunned. Ronald Platt was the victim found dead in the sea. He asked for a description of the man, and it perfectly matched the David Davis he had previously met. This is when doubts turned into certainty. David had been impersonating Ronald Platt. The case was reopened, and the investigation started again from scratch. Police questioned neighbors, who revealed that Ronald lived with a young wife and 2 children, facts previously unknown about David. They also discovered that David, or whoever was posing as Ronald, had been living under a false identity for a long time, and might have had multiple motives to get rid of the real Ronald. Going back to the fisherman who discovered the body, he also mentioned finding a small anchor near the corpse, which he gave to an acquaintance. Police retrieved the anchor and began connecting more dots in the case. Police contacted a former girlfriend of Ronald named Elaine, who knew about his relationship with David. And this is when the biggest twists began to unfold. The rest of the investigation continues with astonishing complexity, and facts stranger than fiction. It turned out that David hadn't been a normal person from the beginning. Elaine said she first met him 5 years before the incident, when she was working at a fine art exhibition. David was one of the visitors, browsing the displayed paintings. They had a casual conversation. She described him as polite, and said his way of speaking was charming, making anyone enjoy talking to him. He was also remarkably skilled at shifting topics smoothly. But what surprised Elaine was that, after their conversation ended, he made a strange offer. He proposed a job with a salary far higher than what she was currently earning, and said, "Since you love travel and art, I have a large investment company and I'd like you to be part of it." Elaine was thrilled by the offer, but remembered she was about to travel with her boyfriend, Ronald Platt. And this is where David's connection to Ronald began, with Elaine as the link between them. David told her, "Don't worry, I'll cover all the travel expenses for you and your boyfriend." From that moment, David became their friend. Ronald was a simple man, dreaming of a stable life, and he had always wished to move to Canada. He met with David several times, admired his personality, and their friendship grew quickly. David offered them the chance to manage his company, saying that because he was going through a divorce, he didn't want anything registered in his name to avoid legal claims from his ex-wife. So, he suggested putting the company entirely in their names, while he remained behind the scenes. The company was called Cavendish Corporation, and the idea seemed very appealing to Elaine and Ronald. They trusted David even more because he appeared religious, regularly attending church and praying according to their faith. One evening, he invited them to spend Christmas Eve with him and his daughter, Noelle, in 1992. On New Year's Eve, he sent them a gift, 2 plane tickets to Canada, saying, "This is my gift to you, go and start your life there." Elaine was overjoyed but asked, "How will we survive there without jobs or money?" He replied, "Once I finish handling my company matters, I'll hand over its management to you." Ronald, who had long dreamed of moving to Canada, was thrilled by the offer. But suddenly, David made an odd additional suggestion. He said he needed to create signature stamps for them so he could use their signatures on business documents while they were in Canada, without needing their direct input. They traveled to Canada in February 1993. But they stayed there for a long time without jobs. The promised position never came through. David kept making excuses, saying the company papers weren't finalized yet. He told them to take temporary jobs in the meantime. Elaine struggled to settle there and couldn't find work. Ronald, too, had a tough time before finally landing his first job. The weather was cold, and the winter was harsh. After 5 months, Elaine returned to England for her sister's wedding and decided never to go back to Canada. Ronald, however, stayed, holding on to his dream. When David found out that Elaine wasn't returning, he was furious. He went to her and tried to convince her to come back, constantly saying he didn't like to see the 2 of them separated. But she refused. Not long after, David packed his things and left Harrogate, the city where Elaine lived. From then on, she lost contact with him. He stopped answering her calls. What Elaine didn't know was that, from that moment, David began living under her boyfriend Ronald Platt's identity. For 3 years, he lived as Ronald. Then in 1997, fishermen discovered the real Ronald's body in the sea. 3 months later, David contacted Elaine again, as if nothing had happened, even though the police had informed her of the case. When she confronted him, he showed no distress. Instead, he acted like he was pretending to be sad. His reaction was shallow and theatrical. Elaine agreed to meet him at a cafe near her workplace. There, he told her he was heading to Chelmsford Station to catch a train back home. As soon as he left, she called the police and gave them his supposed destination. But after monitoring, they found out he hadn't boarded the train. The next day, police went to his home and saw someone moving nearby. It was David. They watched him get into a taxi, then followed him and cut him off on the road. He was extremely calm when arrested, cooperative, and said, "I'm at your service." When they searched him, they found 2 IDs, one under the name David Davis, the other under Ronald Platt. He was taken to the station, but the problem was that there was no solid evidence proving he had killed Ronald. And he didn't confess. Police sent his fingerprints to Interpol. While the investigation continued, officers searched his home and noticed photos of him on a yacht. But no yacht was currently docked. They kept investigating until they found the yacht at a harbor near Ronald's home. Upon searching the yacht, they found bloodstains and scattered hair, along with a bag bearing Ronald's fingerprints. They went to a marine supply store and learned he had purchased an anchor, the same one found tied to Ronald's body. Forensic experts confirmed that Ronald's head injury matched the type caused by that anchor. Then came the ultimate shock from Interpol. The arrested man wasn't David Davis. His real name was Albert Johnson, one of Canada's most wanted fugitives. Albert had once lived a normal life, married with children, and worked at a company from which he embezzled $3.5 million Canadian dollars. After his divorce, he disappeared with his daughter and was never seen again. The real David Davis was an investor in the same company Albert worked for, and Albert had stolen his identity. Albert killed Ronald because he needed a new identity to hide under in England. Since Ronald was a good fit, he forged his documents using all the information he had gathered from Elaine, including Ronald's signature stamp. After the real Ronald returned from Canada, there were now 2 Ronalds, and one had to go. Albert decided to kill Ronald on the yacht with a blow to the head, then tossed him into the sea. Albert's plan was going perfectly. But what he didn't expect was that Ronald's Rolex watch, along with a little luck, would expose his crime and unravel one of the strangest cases ever. In the end, Albert's trial lasted no more than 2 hours before he was sentenced to life imprisonment. A story full of mystery and deception, but in the end, truth prevailed, and justice was served, even if it took time.